concerned that AI was likely to be an existential threat to humanity in the near future. And this is a sharp guy. This is a clever guy. This is a guy who's not prone to hyperventilating panics, but like he's rigorously rational and logical. I respect him, and he's smart. He was deadly serious. He pointed me to data and charts, gave me reasons and explanations for why this is a real concern that we should worry about. And he's deadly serious, so serious he quit his job. And he is preparing, because what he expects to happen is he expects there'll be a warning shot. AI will do something terrible or unexpected or remarkable, and there'll be this one moment where he has a chance to rally public opinion and public support to put some more safeguards in place. So what about you? What do you worry about the most, do you think? I thought it'd be interesting just to see, and I wonder if you can help me out. One slider here, hopefully, is going to ask us, what do you really think could be the end of our world? I wonder what your kind of fears are, what things are at the top of your mind. It's a cheery way to start the talk, isn't it? But there is a reason. It does all come together in the end. So what have we got here? Global heating and sun death. Well, sun death, definitely, that is going to be serious. An asteroid strike. People were seriously worried about a particular asteroid just a few weeks ago. That's totally a real one. Paperclip maximizing AI. A joke for the older ones among us. I enjoy. Who remembers Clippy, Microsoft's there you go. Clippy might take over. And that would truly be really bad if that happened. Wow, lots of votes for AI. Is that because it's only 2 letters and therefore easy to type? That's maybe what's going on there. No cake after church. That is genuinely likely to be the end of our world. Thank you very much. And certain names make their way to the front, as you might imagine. Well, this morning we've got some good news from Jesus. Well, sort of, at least. He says there will be catastrophes, persecutions, deceptions, people losing their faith. But he says none of that is going to be the end of the world. We've been working our way through Matthew's Gospel since about the dawn of time, it seems, and we're now into like the last week of Jesus' life, the last few chapters of the story. And today we're going to see Jesus beginning to draw back the curtain on the future as something people often find fascinating, very exciting. I've certainly found this exciting in the past, but it is tricky stuff to understand right. It is easy stuff to get wrong. So we're going to need our thinking hats on. So enough of the end of the world. Let's have a look at Matthew's Gospel and chapter 24, and that's on page 993 in our blue Bibles that you can find around you. You might want that one open today because we'll stick with it. Page 993, and Susie is going to come and read for us this morning. Look for the big 24. Bless you.
Is it okay? Yeah. Matthew 24 and verse 1. Jesus left the temple and was walking away with his disciples when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? He asked. Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming, I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you're not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come.
Thanks, Susie. Well, like I said, we're into the last few days of Jesus' life. We're approaching the culmination of this story. And I'm just going to go over here so I don't accidentally bump into that speaker all the time. That's better. As we pick up this story, Jesus is leaving the temple, and he's leaving the temple for the very last time, and it's off the back of the lament that we finished with last week. Jesus left the temple, our author says, and then he underlines the finality of the departure. And he was walking away, but as he walks away, the disciples are in awe of this temple, and I think they want Jesus to appreciate it too. I guess they've only been in Jerusalem for a few days, and maybe they've never been there before this last week. And though we don't have pictures, we do know that this iteration of Jerusalem's temple, because there were a few that were built and knocked down, this iteration really was a spectacular sight. This is one artist's kind of model. If you look too closely, it really does look like a model. But this is one artist's model of what the temple might have looked like. You've got these monumental things. It was one of the architectural wonders of the world at the time it went together. Stone, some of the stones plated with gold so it shines in the sun. Some's got some bronze. It's taken them 46 years to build this temple, we're told in John's Gospel. They had to kind of start by expanding the mountain it was built on because the mountain wasn't big enough to fit the new temple they had planned. So they built a huge retaining wall and kind of built up a huge platform. And the temple's made out of these enormous stones that people are wondering, how did you even do that? How could they have been moved? Well, do you see all these things, Jesus asks? Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every single one will be thrown down. And you have to imagine the disciples are shocked when they hear those words. We say gobsmacked is kind of our slang for that. These are jaw-dropping words for Jesus. They're almost incomprehensible. First, they're almost incomprehensible because this temple is massive. It's absolutely massive. Who and how is anyone going to break that down? But second, and perhaps more importantly, the thing that's not so obvious to us is this temple was critical. It was the very heart of the Jewish faith. It's the one place on earth in their thinking where the presence of God is manifest. It's the bridge, if you like, between heaven and earth, between God and people. It's where you can honor God through sacrifice. It's where you must assemble through pilgrimage multiple times per year. It's their key symbol of identity. It's the center of their culture. It's quite hard for us to get our heads around how central it would have been for them. And that is going to be utterly destroyed. Utterly destroyed. I don't know what our contemporary equivalent is that would have the same sort of impact inside of us. Maybe something like Parliament is suddenly wiped off of the map. Though actually, that might be quite a lot better if that happened. Maybe London wiped up. No, maybe that's not such a bad. Okay, it's quite hard for us to get our heads around how critical and central this was. Jesus is describing something cataclysmic. Do you know that word? It means something huge and something bad. Something huge and bad. And it's going to shake their whole world. And that raises some big questions for them, obviously. So once Jesus' followers are with him outside the city, they ask him some more. If this temple is going to be totally destroyed, well, what does that mean? Tell us, they said. When will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Now, they're asking about Jesus' coming. What are they getting at with Jesus' coming? Well, he's spoken about how he's going to go away and then come back. He's spoken about that a bunch of times. He's going to return with glory. Perhaps he speaks about that most clearly in Matthew chapter 16. He's going to return leading mighty angelic forces. But he's given similar explanations and predictions about his return a few other times. Matthew chapter 10 or John chapter 14, if you want to look at those later. But I'm guessing by this point, his disciples are expecting Jesus is going to go away and he is going to come back. He's going to go somewhere and later somehow return, but I'm pretty sure they did not understand why or what his going away meant or how it was really going to happen. Even though he's tried to warn them pretty precisely, he's explained as they go to Jerusalem, he will be handed over to the leaders in Jerusalem and he will be killed. He's told them that several times, but they don't seem to get their heads around it. And I'm pretty sure they didn't understand the sort of return Jesus had in mind either. Perhaps they're thinking not about what he said so much as what about the wider, older Testament part of the Bible speaks to us about the return of kind of the promised one, the Messiah. So if you're looking for that, you might want to look at, there's a book in the Old Testament called Daniel, and Daniel chapter 7 will have some of the pictures that maybe are going around the disciples' mind about what's going on. And this end of the age, what does Jesus mean by the end of the age? Well, he's only specifically mentioned that once before, back in chapter 13. But he has alluded to it again and again and again. Jesus is teaching oftentimes about a day when God will call time on this world, when he finally deals with everything that is wrong here and rewards good. So when's that going to happen? What's going to signpost that? The disciples ask all these questions together, I think, because the fall of that temple is so wrapped up in their minds with their identity and their faith. They probably can't imagine a future without it. They're all deeply Jewish, these disciples, remember. It's the heart of their faith, and the temple continues to have a big role in their story if you read on into the life of the very earliest church. They probably would assume destroying the temple could only happen as a part of the winding up of everything at the end of the age. So I think that's where you get the questions together. And notice they ask Jesus two separate things. They have a question about timing. When is this going to happen? And they've got a question about indicators. What will be the sign? Now, Jesus doesn't answer their timing question at all. And as a bit of a spoiler, just a few lines further down this page, you'll see he tells us, in fact, no one but the Father knows the answer to that question. So one of the things to notice is Jesus is not giving us here a code to crack to get to an end date so that we can see it coming and plan, to be on holiday before it or something like that. He's not setting out like a cryptic crossword for us to solve with clues and hints so that we'll ultimately get to a magic date. No one knows because no one except the Father knows. There's no answer for them on when. And obviously, a lot of people have spent a lot of time speculating about what date that is going to be, which seems odd when Jesus tells you that no one but the Father knows. So he doesn't really answer the when question, and for most of what we read today, he doesn't even answer the signs question. He does make a lot of predictions. But do you notice what he says about the predictions? These predictions are things that do not signify the end. Such things must happen. But the end is still to come. These things are not the signs of the end. They're things that must precede it. Or all these things are just the beginning of birth pains. So these things don't signify the end of the ages here. What they do is they line the road to it. You can read them and you can see you're still on the journey. You know how our road signs work? Like most of the time they give you destinations that are up ahead and a number of miles until you get there. But then sometimes when you're driving up the M6 or driving up the M1, you get these signs which just tell you, you know what, up here somewhere is the north. And the north is ahead of you, and you will get there in the end. And it's the same thing going the other way. The south is ahead of you. So the signs Jesus is giving us are much more like these ones at the top without numbers. They're like, this is where it's going. These signs show you you're heading in this direction. They're not the ones with numbers that tell you, oh, and in 32, you'll arrive at this, or you'll arrive at that. Like I said already, the disciples probably don't understand that the fall of this great temple could be anything other than the end of the age itself. They probably don't see that those things can happen separate from each other. They don't think they're two different destinations on the signpost. But Jesus sees the path ahead. He knows the end is actually not going to come when the temple falls, and we can look back now and know the same thing. So that makes us wonder then, okay, for each of the signs Jesus gives us then, which destination are they pointing to? Right? Jesus gives us this list of things that are going to happen. Are these things signing the destruction of that glorious temple? Or are these things signing the future and final coming, that kind of end of the age that comes with it? Short answer to that, different scholars, different commentators, different thinkers understand different parts of this chapter differently. At one extreme, you get people who say, everything listed here has already happened, and the main point is that there's nothing more to wait for. Every generation since these days has lived on the cusp of the return of Jesus. There are no more signposts expected. It's right up ahead. The other end of the spectrum, you get people who see almost everything in this chapter as still ahead of us, beginning in the last days. And you can read about that in the book of Revelation or Daniel. Most commentators end up somewhere between those two extremes, but it is pretty hard to tease out. This one points to this, and that one points to that. And if that feels surprisingly vague or frustratingly vague, I'm sorry, it is. I've heard people describe it a bit like standing at the top of a hill and looking all the way over to the horizon. Now, once you're looking into the distance, those summits in the distance, they start to get superimposed on top of each other. It's quite hard to tell where one mountain range begins and where the next does. And maybe it's a bit like that. There are these different destinations up ahead, the fall of the temple and the end of all things, and they're far enough away that they get superimposed like that. One commentator puts it this way, kind of connecting a bit more tightly. The destruction of Jerusalem is the prototype, the kind of precursor, the foreshadowing of the end of the world. So even as you see this Jerusalem meeting its fate, so will everyone who dwells on the face of the earth. So perhaps it's not that important that we're able to separate these signs out exactly and figure out which one signs towards the destruction of the temple and which one signs towards the end. And that's just as well because I don't have that figured out. Perhaps we can get too caught up into trying to unpick mysterious, fascinating sections of the Bible like this, where, if we're honest, we just don't have the tools or we just don't have the brains to get to the bottom of it. Sometimes I wonder if the reason God puts in things like this is just to humble us, for us to rack our brains, work our hardest, and come out saying, well, I don't know, I'm not equal to this. It's beyond our grasp, perhaps. But if it bothers you that there are things in the Bible, some things that are not particularly clear, remember that God has made plenty of things in the Bible very, very clear. And I'm often reminded of this quote. It's often attributed to Mark Twain. It's not the parts of the Bible I don't understand that trouble me the most. It is the parts that I do understand. I think the truth is I sometimes use my wrestling with the less clear parts of the Bible to avoid doing the things that are perfectly clear. Love your neighbor. Love your enemy. These are hard. And the truth is, sometimes I'd rather avoid them. I wonder if you would too. So what are we going to do with a bit of the Bible like this? It's pretty confusing. It's pretty mysterious. It's quite hard for us to figure out. We have to remember when we get to bits like this, where we can't get to 100% solid answers, the point was not for us to know exactly when things were going to happen, or that would have been perfectly clear. The point was, it's meant to have an impact on how we live now. I read a lot about this, as you can tell. Here's another person I read, his thoughts on it. He says, the Bible doesn't record prophecy of the end time simply for curiosity's sake. Prophecy about the future is always given for the purpose of affecting behavior in the present. The point of telling us about the future is not just so we can know interesting things. The point of telling us about the future is to affect how we live here and now. So what's the point? What should we do with these signs? Why did Jesus tell his disciples these things? Why did they carefully write them down and pass them down to us? I think there are 4 big takeaways from this passage. And the first is, don't be alarmed. Don't be alarmed. I think one of the reasons Jesus is telling us these things is so that we don't misread the chaos in our world as this is the end of the world. I think he's saying for all the turmoil, for the very real disasters, for the suffering, for the pain in our world, for all of those, it's not going to succeed in tearing itself apart. It might be bad, but it's not the end of the world. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. These things, these terrible things, wars, famines, earthquakes, persecutions, betrayals, people falling away from faith, they will all come. But they're not how it is all going to end. They're just a sign that it will end. Jesus describes them as the beginning of birth pains. Now, not speaking from experience here. I can only give you my impression secondhand. But what I do know is that birth pains are not trivial. Jesus is not saying these signs are incidental. They'll be like little speed bumps in the road. Not things you brush off and cruise through without noticing. That's not what he's saying with this. He's saying these catastrophes in our world, there's great pain, there's awful suffering, and it's going to come in waves. Any of you been close to birth pains? You know, sometimes there's waves in there. It totally interrupts normal life. It dominates our experience. That's one side of what Jesus is saying with this idea of birth pains. The other side is the certainty that something is coming. It's imminent. It's right at the door. In the case of birth pains, for those who are parents, I expect you'll agree with me, it is something utterly life-changing that is coming, something that will turn your world upside down. It is definitely coming, but even the sharpest doctors can't tell you quite when. It doesn't change the fact that it's coming, even if these pains go on for a long time. What does that mean for us here in our relatively peaceful corner of the world 2,000 years after Jesus spoke? Well, while there are times of peace and calm and order and civility, even in those quieter moments, I think Jesus warns us another round of birth pains might be around the corner. So we shouldn't panic. We shouldn't be alarmed if that comes. It might be bad, but it's not the end of the world. I was thinking about this. Could our world quickly unravel around us? Well, these past few weeks, if anything, tell us the answer is certainly yes. Could we quickly see the end of relative peace? Yeah, of course. Like so many others in the world around us have done down through the ages. I think for me, the start of the war in Ukraine just over 3 years ago is a real wake-up call. We do not live in a post-conflict era where none of these things could ever happen again. This is an actual possibility, not an impossible fiction. Peace and order is not guaranteed. It really might get bad. Birth pains are painful. But if it does, it is not the end of the world. Just a sign that it will end. Such things must come. Don't be alarmed. Instead, second, Jesus tells us to stand firm. The one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And what does Jesus mean by stand firm? Hold your ground. Maintain your course. Endure. Wait. Wait with sure hope. And I want to share with you a tool I often use when I'm trying to unpack an instruction like this that Jesus gives us. What we can do sometimes is we can consider the opposite. I want to know what it means to stand firm. Well, let me consider the opposite. What's the opposite of standing firm? What are we to avoid? We're to avoid being moved. And I think that's why we got warnings in here not to be deceived. Verse 4, verse 11. One of the key ways to fail to stand firm is to swallow a lie. For example, the idea that anything else could deliver our world from this brokenness and this pain. That anything else could solve all of our problems, whether that's better education or more tolerance for others or better weapons to keep the peace or scientific breakthroughs or just better world leaders. None of these things can or will ultimately deliver us. Only Jesus can. And if there was any other way out, God would not have sent his only Son into the world to die. If there was another solution, we would have another solution. But there is no other way. So hang on to the truth that God has spoken to us in his Bible. Believe him when he speaks about just how deep the brokenness goes, how serious the rot is. It goes right to the center of every human heart, and it will take nothing less than a fundamental renewal. Heart surgery by God himself. The more we hold on to that, the kind of gravity to our problem, the cost of the solution, and the love of God that chooses to pay that price, well, the easier it is to keep your love from growing cold. I was thinking about this, and there's another tool the Bible gives us to keep our love from growing cold. And it's one that's with me here today. One another. In our Sunday gatherings, as we meet together, but also when we meet up through the week and connect. There's a letter in the Bible called the letter to the Hebrews that gives us this clear instruction. Let us consider how we might spur one another on to love and to good deeds. Not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. And then it closes with this link, all the more as you see the day approaching. This is another phrase the Bible uses to talk about the end of the age or the end of the day. Thinking we often come to church thinking about what will I receive? What am I going to get out of this today? What encouraged me this morning? What did I learn? What was I reminded of? It's very easy to focus on what we receive and be so focused on that we overlook what we could have given to others. So let me ask you, who this week did you spur on towards love, towards good deeds? Who did you take the time to encourage and build up? Instruction is exactly in the light of this approaching last day, exactly in the face of these birth pains that we're to consider. We're to be deliberate, planned, thoughtful, intentional, how we can spur one another on. And the truth is, I know plenty of us are pretty discouraged rather than encouraged. Don't think I know anyone who would say they are over-encouraged. So do feel free to encourage one another. I think that we do have a real shortage of that. You could be the key to somebody else standing firm. A simple, small word to them during the week. Don't overlook that when we come together. Don't overlook that in the week when you connect with other believers. So this week, look for a specific opportunity where you can encourage believers you meet, spur them on, remind them of God's great love shown to them in Jesus, challenge them to hang on to this through the birth pains, stand firm. Thirdly, be encouraged. Be encouraged because Jesus has got a powerful encouragement for us here. The gospel of the kingdom, this good news that God's building a new kingdom, reaching out to us in grace, offering us forgiveness through Jesus, drawing us into his family, transforming our hearts. Well, this good news is going to be announced, going to be proclaimed around the world. The end is coming. That means birth pains. But with birth pains, joy comes in the morning. This kingdom is coming. These wars, persecutions, these cataclysms, they cannot stop the events of this kingdom. Quite the opposite. The birth pains announce that it is imminent, that is, it's on the horizon, it draws ever nearer. We're on the cusp of it, the edge of it. That leads me, I think, to the final application here. The end will come. Now, we're going to talk about this more in the weeks ahead because Jesus keeps talking about these things for a while longer. But if you're not a Christian here today, the most important thing you need to know is that the end will come. Jesus will return, this present age will be over, and it will be as cataclysmic as the destruction of that ancient temple. Everything in our world is going to be overturned, and the only route to safety on that day is this gospel of the kingdom Jesus is speaking about. The good news that there is a way to life through Jesus' death. If that safety isn't yours yet, it needs to be, because the end will come. It's imminent. The birth pains signal it. So if you don't understand what the gospel is, talk to someone around you or talk to me. If you're with us online, post in the chat. Comment if you're watching a video. We want to help you understand. And if you're in the category of people that do understand, but you've just never done anything about it, do that today because this end is imminent. Speak to Jesus in your head. He's listening. Cry out to him for rescue. He will hear you. Tell someone you've taken that step because we'd love to help you get established in this new life. So, Here's our bottom line. Don't be alarmed. These things must come. Stand firm and help one another stand firm. Be encouraged. This kingdom is irresistible, unshakable. The end will come. Now, I'm sure this sort of topic raises plenty of questions, and we'll have time to get to that in a minute. But before we do, we're going to use a song to wrap this up and conclude today. Ellen had a brilliant pick for us. I think it is so suitable. It's just going to help us think about and focus on the good news for us today. A mighty fortress is our God. If we keep our eyes on him through it all, his kingdom will not be shaken. He is a mighty fortress for us. So let's sing.
Let's stand and sing. A mighty fortress is our God. His kingdom is unshakable. Now, often after a talk, we maybe have a song that is lighter for us to kind of meditate and reflect on. Well, this is not so much. This is kind of a full force song, which will hopefully rouse us. And as we sing and encourage one another, hopefully we will be built up and encouraged in the strength that comes from knowing God and knowing this truth together. It's my guitar on. There we go. Thank you. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Comprehend his love and his mercy. Our God is exalted on his throne, high above the heavens, forever he is worthy. We will keep our eyes on you. We will keep our eyes on you, so we can set our hearts on you. Lord, we will set our hearts on you. A mighty fortress is our God. A sacred refuge is your name. Your kingdom is unshakable. With you forever we will reign. Almighty fortress is our God. A sacred refuge is your name. Your kingdom is unshakable. With you forever we will reign. With you forever we will reign.
Amen. Take a seat.
Thank you so much, musicians. As I mentioned earlier, we love to interact with one another at Hope City, and we're going to spend a few minutes now reflecting on Matt's talk and any questions that you've sent in. So have a little chat amongst yourselves for a few minutes, and then Matt will come back up, and we will do our best to answer some of your questions. Could we get the questions on the screen, please? Thank you. So yeah, take a couple of minutes to chat amongst yourselves, and then we'll have a look at your questions together. Right, if you want to pause your conversation just now, and please do continue them afterwards. I think we've only got one genuine question up there. Yes.
It was Anthony Bailey. Well done. And if you want to read the data he showed me, it's situational-awareness.ai. Will give you the heebie-jeebies about the end of the world if you want to read it.
At least it wasn't John Connor, though. That would have been much scarier,
Connor.
though. But someone has asked, if no one but the Father knows the end date, does Jesus know?
Ooh, well, if we have one God in three persons, and these three are one and the same in essence, how could it be possible that the Father could know something that Jesus does not know if they are one and the same? That is theologically gnarly. The general explanation for this is that Jesus voluntarily limits himself as he humbles himself and becomes human, and that this is one of the things that he lets go of in his state of humiliation while he lives as a human on earth. But today, Jesus is one with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and restored to the fullness of his glory in heaven, and today he certainly does know. So that's kind of generally how that's understood to work.
Yeah, I think I was thinking when I saw the question earlier about when the disciples ask again at the beginning of Acts, just before Jesus ascends to heaven, about what's going to happen, and Jesus says, that's not for you to know. I think that's the kind of main point we need to understand, is that whether or not Jesus and the Trinity stuff, like how that works with what Jesus knows and doesn't know, the point is what we know is that it's going to happen, and we need to act accordingly. I really liked that quote you put up about how when we're told things about the future, it's supposed to affect the present, like what we do now, as we respond to what Jesus teaches us.
It's not intriguing details. It's like fascinating, so that you can pass some exam somewhere. It's meant to change how we live now.
Yeah, we've got a couple more questions now, actually. Let's see. There we are. What is an example of being deceived? Can it happen to Christians?
I think there's no end of examples of people being deceived. Not thinking of a good example right now, but cults that believe the end of the world is nigh, and so, or choose to take their own lives in terrible ways. People twisting what Jesus said to say things it doesn't. People claiming that Jesus' word wasn't the last word, and that in fact these gold tablets that have been given to me by an angel are the last word, and let me start a whole nother thing. So the loads of examples of being deceived. Can it happen to Christians? We're actually going to get to address exactly that point next week, and Tom will get to speak about that. To deceive if possible, even the elect is one of the verses coming in next week's passage. So I suggest you hang on to that question and ask Tom. But if you want my precursor question to that, can the elect be deceived? I think that it's notable that Jesus uses exactly the same phrases when he is in the Garden of Gethsemane. Take this cup, if possible, he prays, take this cup from me. Does that mean it is possible? No, it does not mean it is possible. So if it was possible to deceive the elect, but it's not. It's what the people try and deceive and think. But we'll talk more about that next week.
Yeah.
That wasn't very helpful.
Stay tuned, yeah. One more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
7 more. No, the kids will explode. The kids will
The
explode.
clock is ticking, yes. I thought I clicked it. I did not. Where's it gone? There you are. How to stand firm in an ever-moving ground in today's world.
Yeah. I thought the instruction from Hebrews was really helpful, the idea that we can spur one another on to love and good deeds, that we are part of what will help us stand firm as a community. I think we're looking for things that don't move, and the words of Jesus and the words of our scriptures are things that don't move and that can help us stand firm and hold on to things. But I think one another is a big key in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I speak from experience. Don't do it alone. Don't try and do it on your own strength. I mean, Bible tells you pretty explicitly not to do that. Trust in Jesus and rely on him. But also with the church, I mean, you guys know how much you've supported me through difficult things in my life, and I'm sure others can testify to their own lives and how the church family supported them. So much of living as a Christian is living in community, living in support with your brothers and sisters. So that's my recommendation as well.
Very cool. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking about how novelty in theology is typically not an exciting idea. If none of the thousands and millions of dedicated followers of Jesus who prayed more and were more spiritual and knew his words better than us have had a particular idea up until now, it's probably not a good idea. Humbling ourselves is a good way to stand firm. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. Before you head off, can you just remind us the big idea that you want us to take away from this morning?
I was thinking about what we should emphasize, and I think probably for us as a church, I think be encouraged, the end is coming, is probably the right takeaway for us. Be encouraged. It is easy to be discouraged when you feel like the world is against you, the world is falling apart, when you feel like everything we're doing is making no difference, when you look at your own life and you feel like you are not making any progress. Well, take some heart and some confidence from Jesus here. Be encouraged. The end is coming.
Great, thanks so much, Matt. So that brings us to the end of our formal time together, but please do stick around for coffee and chat, and there's some lovely homemade baking at the back of the room. A reminder for those aged 10 to 18 that we've got youth group tonight, so please come here, stick around after the afternoon gathering, or turn up about 4:45, 5 o'clock, and we'll have some games, food, and some Bible chat. When we finish in just a moment, can we please get some help to clear up some of the chairs at the back, and to leave some Bibles on the seats for the afternoon gathering? That would be appreciated. And if you've got kids at classes, please go and collect them. Let me just close with these words from the book of Romans. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.